me why you came. Now when the period fucked up and we start naming names. Remember back in the day.
You know, I want to talk about something that's really bothering me. And for a lot of ex-witnesses with children, I'm sure that this is something you'll be able to relate to. My daughter right now is currently going to the Kingdom Hall and is somewhat an active participant. Now, my daughter is only 11 years old, so she really is at the mercy of her caretakers. Now, her mother's a good mother. You know, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to deny that. She's a great mother. But, needless to say, me as an ex-witness and her as an active witness in taking my daughter to the Kingdom Hall, I'm really afraid for her. I'm afraid. She knows that this is not the truth. She knows. Straight up. Even as an 11-year-old, she was pointing out a lot of inconsistencies and things that she sees that are wrong, you know. She's saying, well, why does it say here in the Bible such and such, but I was reading in the Watchtower and you can see online that this isn't right. So she already can see these things and she's using her critical thinking abilities, and I'm very proud of her for this. Very proud of her, because I haven't tried to indoctrinate her. I haven't tried to say, oh, well, yeah, you know, this, that, and the other, and yeah, you need to believe this way or the other. I have told my daughter, I said, you know, Maishataya, that's her name, Maishataya. I've said, Maishataya, all I want you to do is think for yourself. That's the only thing that I'm asking you to do. Think for yourself. Whatever somebody tells you, weigh it, and just see if it makes sense for yourself. Do your own research and think critically. Do not let anyone, including me, tell you what to think. You do your own research, you use your common sense, and find out what you need to find out. And I hope that my daughter does this soon about the blood doctrine, because it scares the hell out of me. Because think about this, and for, you know, non-witnesses who are watching this, let me tell you why we ex-witnesses and even active Jehovah's Witnesses are afraid of this controversy. And let me tell you why I'm personally afraid of this situation regarding my daughter. If my daughter was to get in a wreck right now, she's 11 years old going on 12 here in 2019. She's going to be 12 here in June. If she was to get into a wreck right now, she could die because her parents refused the blood transfusion, because her mom and stepdad refused the blood transfusion that would have saved her life. All right, think about that for a minute. 12 years old, taken out. Against her will. Because I don't think she would refuse a blood transfusion. And you know what? Scripturally, she really wouldn't have a reason to. Because if you actually look at the scriptural implications of blood, yes, it does say to abstain from blood, to abstain from fornication, to abstain from idols. But anytime you read that in its proper context, it's talking about abstaining from food sacrificed to idols. Because then there's advice at the end of it. You will prosper, good health to you. Even when it said to abstain from blood and to abstain from fornication, in that scripture, it didn't say because this is a direct commandment from God, even though fornication is a direct commandment from God. No, it got looped in there as part of good health. In other words, abstain from hoeing around, abstain from blood, namely in the sense of not eating food sacrificed to idols, which had blood in them at the time. If you do your research on the history of what Paul was actually talking about, he was talking about food sacrificed to idols that still had blood in it. He said, if you do these things, or by doing these things, you will prosper, good health to you. He didn't equate it to direct, blasphemous disobedience to God. No, that's not how he equated it. He equated it to good health. Abstaining from blood meant abstaining from food sacrificed to idols and getting any kind of bacterias or whatever pathogens that could be passed along through blood. But he didn't talk about it in a medical sense. So then at that point it becomes a conscience decision as to whether a Christian will accept blood or not accept blood. But Taya, not being a baptized member of Jehovah's Witnesses, should be able to refuse that. But that probably wouldn't happen, because in the event where she's unconscious, her mother would refuse that blood transfusion. And so with the elders, that would keep me from being able to see my daughter. Look it up. Jehovah's Witnesses have a liaison committee that keeps people like me who would say, give my daughter a blood transfusion and save her life, from being able to get up in that hospital to do that. I would just get a call days later saying, oh yeah, your daughter died, by the way, after we refused to give her a blood transfusion, over an out of context scripture that referred to not eating food sacrificed to idols, not medical treatment. It didn't have anything to do with medical treatment. You can take it out of context and stretch it as far as you want. But the truth of the matter, witnesses, is that it didn't have anything to do with medical treatment. It didn't. It just didn't. Like I said, go look it up and go actually read the 2 verses where it's cited in reference to the Old Testament in the New Testament. Look at those two verses. To abstain from things sacrificed to idols, to abstain from fornication, and from blood. In context, it's talking about food. It's talking about things sacrificed to idols. It is not referred to directly. It's a stretch. And because it's a stretch, it should be a conscientious decision left up to the individual witness. It should not be something that is enforced to the point where people are dying over a scripture. Dying over a scripture that's taken out of context. I love my daughter, and I wouldn't know what to do if I got a call one day saying, yeah, we got into a wreck and we didn't call you because we knew that, you would try to get her a blood transfusion. And, even if you did, we had the liaison committee waiting for you to stop you at the door, just in case you tried to get her that blood transfusion. And that is wrong. It's wrong, and it's taken out of scriptural context. Go look it up. Read the whole verse. Compare it to the Old Testament where it's cited. It talks about food sacrificed to idols. And even if it doesn't talk about that, witnesses, it talks about not taking it in through the mouth. It didn't refer, especially enough to enforce it as a disfellowshipping offense, to anything else. So that was just a concern that I had. It was something that I've been thinking about. And it's something that's been heavy on my mind this morning that I wanted to talk about and I wanted to share. So any help that could be provided in this would be great. And for the Jehovah's Witnesses that are reading this or listening to this, stop reading those scriptures through the lens of Watchtower and start reading it through the lens of what Paul meant when he wrote it down in the first place. Because if he was here right now, he would probably tell you, well, to be honest, Jehovah's Witnesses, I didn't mean it the way that you thought I meant it. I meant as in, do not eat food sacrificed to idols that has blood in it. Stay away from the blood because it's sacred. That was referring to animal blood anyway. It was a vague scripture. It's a vagary. It's vague. It's almost as vague as oral sex or masturbation. These are vagaries. These are things that could be applied in principle or misapplied in principle. And that's why they are dangerous to enforce, because to enforce them wrongly to the point where people are dying means you have blood on your hands. So that's something really serious to think about, friends. So think about that the next time you go to refuse a blood transfusion for your child. Think if you're actually getting it right. Think if you're actually understanding it in its original context. Because someone's life is on the line. And that's something to think about. And that is something to give it due consideration for. That's something to think twice about before you do that, before you make a decision. Make sure it's really in context. Make sure you're understanding it correctly, because your life could be on the line. But more importantly than that, your family's life or a family member's life could be on the line.